Well, welcome. Thank you all for coming. I hope you all had a really productive morning. And I hope that you will find the story that we're going to share with you compelling, and that you will learn some lessons from us so that you don't repeat some of the things and maybe you want to take on others. So do some critical thinking while we're sharing with you. I want to start by introducing myself, and then I'm going to ask my team to introduce themselves. My name is Alicia Rizzo, and I am the principal of Lynnwood Elementary School in the Guilderland Central School District. I am entering my 8th year as principal at Lynnwood.
I'm Joanna Romano. I teach 4th grade at Lynnwood, soon to be 5th grade. This will be my 29th year teaching. I also serve as the science teacher leader in the building.
My name is Brian Gary. This will be my 5th year teaching, my 4th year at Lynnwood, and I teach 2nd grade.
My name is Heather Kennedy, and I just finished my 10th year teaching, and my entire career has been at Lynnwood, and I'm a special educator.
And I'm Jackie Vandenberg, and I teach 5th grade. I'm going into my 6th year teaching at Lynnwood, and I also serve as the technology liaison for our building.
Heather is also our building rep for our teachers union, so she's going to share some of her perspective as both a teacher and as a member of the teachers union as we talk about some of the changes that we needed to make. And I want to introduce this lady right here. I'll let you introduce yourself, even though she's not here for the formal presentation. Those of you who want to stay after to talk about the collaboration between the superintendent and the principal.
That would be me. I'm Marie Wild, superintendent of schools, and very proud mama right here.
She says that now. We will tell you some stories. Not true. But our hope here when you leave is that we've shared a little bit with you about what we've learned about school change and trying to change the culture to accommodate the current challenges that we're facing in education. And hopefully you'll hear the theory, but more importantly, our goal here is really to just tell you a compelling story so that you can take what you've learned from our story and apply it to whatever's happening in your school or your district. So one of the things I'll invite you to do is think about a change initiative or something that you want to change in your current school or that your current district is going through. You may recognize some of the trials and tribulations that we went through. You might be surprised at some of the successes, and we're happy to share with you. Feel free to break in and ask questions. It's a small group. We just want to have a conversation. I know they're very excited to tell the story, and so we're going to get started here, and you will notice our theme because they're teachers, so we had to have a theme.
And we can't help ourselves. We're elementary teachers. We're all got the Navy going.
But they worked really hard, and I want to acknowledge and say thank you to them. So we're going to set the course with you a little bit, and we just want to share this slide that I actually got to see. We had an administrators retreat last week, and Dr. Robert Hendricks was there working with our administrative team really around challenges, change, and he shared this slide which I thought was so compelling in terms of thinking about those of us in education who've been around, even if you've only been around 2 years, you know that we're always dealing with change. And oftentimes there are change efforts that don't go as smoothly as we had hoped. So whether they are academic, whether they're related to student services, Common Core, APPR, we all see a lot of change, and I've been around. I was a teacher for 18 years in the Albany City School District, so I've been in education for almost 30 years now, and have seen lots of change efforts fail. And this really helped me to think about why that could be. And what we're going to do with our presentation is try and share with you how we try to accomplish these things as we went through change, the change process. So just to illustrate quickly, what we talked about was that any change effort needs to start with a vision. We hear a lot about vision, and sometimes when people are struggling, they say, but what's the vision? We don't know the vision. So we hear as educational leaders a lot about vision. How did we establish the vision? You needed to have skills. How did we make sure that the teachers had the skills they needed? Incentives, what we learned about incentives was it's not about monetary incentives or pay, but the things that the teachers were incentivized by, I think you will find interesting and compelling, and they're going to talk to you about what those things were. I'll give you a hint. It was not about money, but there were other things. But certainly those incentives needed to be there. They needed to have resources to do their work, and absolutely needed to have a plan in order for us to successfully make the changes that we needed to make. In the absence of each of these things, I learned at the workshop that I attended, you get some of the things that often accompany change process. And if you've been in education, think about change. You have experienced confusion, anxiety, resistance, frustration, and diffusion. So this chart just illustrates that, and we're going to try and weave that through our presentation for you today, so that you can see if you have all these things in place, but you don't have a vision, you're going to get confusion amongst your staff. If the teachers don't have the skills, think about maybe Common Core and they weren't ready, it created a lot of anxiety. Even though there may have been a vision, there were incentives, districts spent lots of money on resources, certainly there was a plan, but we still had anxiety. Again, if without those incentives for teachers, a lot of times there's resistance, and we're going to talk a lot about incentives today and what the teachers needed. If they don't have the resources to do it, they're frustrated. And lastly, in the absence of a plan, you get diffusion. So for me, I think about this as spraying an air freshener. You spray the air freshener can and all the particles all go out and they're going all over the place and they're wandering and there's no control about where they're going. And so in order to successfully change, we're going to try and walk you through how we tried to hit some of these things. And again, I'll give you a little bit of the ending. Sometimes we succeeded and sometimes we failed, because that's sort of the real work of that. Yes. Okay, so anchors away here. I'll give you a brief background of this. Imagine that you are a brand new principal. I was the brand new principal of Lynnwood back in 2010, 2011. Just starting out in a Guilderland school. It was a dream job. I was excited to have it, taking over this wonderful Guilderland elementary school. Guilderland was very well known and had all these great ideas. And if you remember being new principals, you are trying to build relationships with your staff, you're trying to listen and learn the culture, and I was very excited to do that. Until one day the new superintendent called and shared information that Lynnwood Elementary School was identified as a school in need of improvement. So for those of you who remember back, we change the terms all the time, but this is in the height of school accountability, and for the first time ever, Guilderland had an elementary school that was on what we called the list. This was the CINE list. We were identified as a school in need of improvement. And she wouldn't let me hide it and not tell the teachers. So I had the privilege of thinking about how was I going to take this elementary school and share some what is likely to be challenging news. The school was identified as a school in need of improvement because we didn't make AYP for students with disabilities. When we looked more into the data, not only did our students with disabilities not make AYP, but our gen ed students were falling farther and farther behind. So that was the dream that I was living, and I want to show you a little bit about that because it was time for an SOS. So very quickly, because I don't want this to be a data presentation, I want to share with you what we were dealing with. So in 2012-13, this was the blue was Lynnwood Elementary School, and here's where our students were in terms of proficiency, and the red was the other 4 buildings in the district. So I got to share that information, and you can imagine how that went over at that staff meeting. Here was us in math. So again, the blue was Lynnwood Elementary School, and the red was the other 4 buildings in the district in terms of how our students were doing in proficiency in math. So I'm going to share a clip with you because it felt a little bit like this that day. Tell me if you can relate.
Okay, all right, it's time to be bossy. Time to motivate, let's blow some minds here. Okay, guys, cool. Everybody, Thunder Mifflin and Scranton employees, Brenda, I have some very, very urgent news I need to tell everybody right now. Listen up. The ship is sinking, okay? We're going down right now. Just wrap your heads around the reality of that. Shh, please, everybody, it's my turn now, okay? Captain Jack is gone. In 5 minutes, this ship is going to be at the bottom of the lake, and there aren't enough spaces on the lifeboat. Who are we going to save? Do we save sales? Do we save customer service? Do we save accounting? This is a business scenario, right? It's a scary hell's go on. break. Well, it's not as corporate friendly as advertised. What is the deal with the guy jumping overboard? What was... If he had just waited and heard what I had to say, he would be motivated right now, not all wet.
So I was a little like Michael Scott, and they did try to put me in the brig, right? So I won't get into all those details, but I am going to ask the teachers to share a little bit from their perspective, how it felt for them to have this new principal share this information with them at a staff meeting.
So I would like to share our whole building perspective. So I'm the type of person that when I'm faced with news like that, I like to look around the room. And I'll never forget the faces I saw that day. As a special educator and as the building rep, I have relationships with almost everybody throughout the building. And I started to have conversations with people around this news, and I was realizing that there were a lot of mixed emotions, kind of like the clip you just saw. We had some people that were defensive, we had some people that didn't even believe the data, we had some people who wanted to jump ship, and we had some people who did. There was denial, defensiveness, and disbelief, and that day the reality hit us in the face, and it hit hard. And it was really difficult to hear, because at the end of the day, Lynnwood was our home, and we loved it. So to receive this news, we couldn't help but to take it personally. And I left that day fearing that what I had considered to be my rock, my school, was beginning to crumble.
Now, I'm the type of person that when I hear a sinking ship, I have one leg overboard and one leg still on the ship. Part of me wants to jump, but the other part wants to stick around and see how this all turns out. I loved Lynnwood. I had been there for 21 years, and hearing this information and seeing the data was kind of like a punch in the gut. And I thought to myself, how could this have happened to Lynnwood, the school where we care about kids, we have such supportive families, we have a committed staff that works well together, we're a respected district, we have highly effective administrators and leaders, we have excellent programs. It was shocking, and I walked away in disbelief and really confused.
This was my first staff meeting. I had just been hired. I had landed, my dream job in a time when teaching jobs were beyond scarce. So I showed up to this meeting with my rose-colored glasses on. I couldn't wait to start. My room was all set up. So this was a bit confusing as a first-year teacher, especially in a time when schools' budgets were getting cut and everything was really up in question. And I was kind of looking at my new coworkers and the feelings that are described right here. You could feel that sense of kind of fracture. There was people who were questioning the data or in disbelief, and it just kind of left me thinking, where are we going to be going as a staff? Because as much as Alicia tried to motivate us to get started, I think everyone was really confused. So it was a tough way to start the year, for sure.
So can you imagine in your buildings how this might feel and how your staff might be feeling, and you're the new person and you're definitely getting tied with those ties. So I'm sure you're all thinking, so okay, great, why are these people talking to us about school culture? Maybe I need to almost so good right now. but that's okay. But so gang away, and I want to fast forward you a little bit to the ending so you know why we're here today. So again, let me just review. This is where we were. This was our data, our ELA data in 2012, and here's our map. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is where we landed after our change initiative. Sorry. So as we thought about how we were going to respond to this, I just want to tell you ahead of time, there's a happy ending. And I think it's going to help you think about, so maybe there's something that interesting to learn here. As you can see, after many years of hard work, we were able to close the gap, and quite rapidly, in terms of how our students were performing in ELA, and at that time were reaching where the rest of the district was. And it was very exciting to see that news in response to what we had done. This was our math, again, and then here's where we landed in math as we thought about how we were going to change. Thank you.
Thank you. We're very proud of this.
Every time we see it.
And so every time we see it, we get really excited, and then we think about
The journey that it took to get there.
So this is where we're hopeful that our journey and our story will be compelling to you to see, because it wasn't just a matter of let's buy a program or let's buy a solution or let's test kids to death. So even though this appears to be about data, this is just one point that we wanted to show you that we were able to successfully get there. And we're feeling a little like this.
vision, that's Alicia.
A lot of scrambling.
And so we share that part because throughout the journey, there were many times where we're like, king of the world! And then we hit another iceberg, something would go wrong. And we had to really think about how were we going to stay on the path. And so we're going to tell you about some of the icebergs, but I wanted you to know that there was a happy ending at the end. So I think it starts with talking a little bit about what the culture of Lynnwood was like back in 2011 when certainly I came into the picture, and I'll let Joanne start.
Sure, so as I said earlier, we were so happy and so proud to be a part of the Lynnwood community. We all wore our Lynnwood t-shirts on Friday and our jeans, and we had our monthly Share and Celebrate get-togethers and all kinds of things going on around the building with grade levels and building-wide activities. And everyone was so happy. It was a great place to be. So as I look back now at Lynnwood, I have to question what was going on that caused us to end up and land where we landed. How did it all happen? I mean, I guess in hindsight, I think about it, there were a number of things that were going on and that we were doing that back then we never could have imagined could have negative results or land us in city status. We were doing what felt good and what felt right at the time, and it ended up having negative implications.
So for starters, the signs of the times were really about programs that fostered kids' self-esteem and their emotions. Now, that's not a bad thing, but we didn't have a balance. And this unbalance resulted in us losing sight of our academics, and our kids needed more from us, and we had to deliver. Thinking back, we were not checking in on how we were doing. We weren't asking ourselves the hard questions, and there wasn't much hard data coming from the state. And at this point in education, schools were just beginning to talk about collecting data